gentlemen, and albinarics of all ages, are you ready?
Grease me up, woman!
Okie dokie.
There comes a time in every human's life where they consider a simple question. What if I was something else? What if the something else that you're thinking of involves stretching your skin out as much as possible to the point that it looks like your head will pop like a balloon if you squeeze it? Then maybe it is time to embody the lovely blood-filled skin sacs known as the albinarics. Specifically, today for you, I'll have a build based around the concept of applying as many different kinds of statuses as quickly as physically possible, and then using similar concepts to take advantage of any direct weaknesses that your enemy will have. The theory behind this build is actually really cool. It isn't going to one-shot bosses really, but what this one does do is let you dig right into whatever specific thing your opponent takes the most damage from. It's like a puzzle almost, and once you work out which specific piece goes exactly where, which part goes against what boss, this build becomes incredibly fun and satisfying. How does this work then exactly? What makes it function and why? Mostly the star of the show is the Ripple Crescent Halberd, for the simple reason that it scales really well with Arcane, in fact better than any other weapon in the game that can have a weapon grease applied to it. And so the goal here is simple. Your Arcane attribute increases your status buildup. Your Arcane attribute makes this weapon do significantly more flat damage as well. And weapon greases as a concept allow you to infuse your weapons with any element or status in the game for 60 seconds, some of them being drawstring greases, which apply significantly faster but only last for around 10 seconds each. For elemental type stuff, that can be a bit of a short period, as using an element is usually more of an intentional, prolonged decision based around an enemy's overall weaknesses, but for statuses, it is a whole other story. If your weapon and build are capable of applying Scarlet Rot in less than 10 seconds, then drawstring rot grease is way better than normal rot grease, as once it is applied, and then you can apply it mid-combat very easily and quickly, at least compared to regular weapon grease. If your goal is instead prolonged combat using whatever thing your opponent is weakest to, then you just want to use normal greases, but the drawstring ones are what make this build quite as cool as it is, rotating through poison, rot, sleep, bleed, and applying each of them incredibly quickly. Frost unfortunately does not have a drawstring grease version, but if you want to apply frostbite, the regular grease still works great. The main thing that makes this great though is enemies with varied weaknesses and big health bars. The big thing is, well, the damage that we can do while using this strategy is actually insanely high, so more often than not, the poison and rot don't actually help a massive amount as far as straight up damage, but what they do is trigger your Kindred of Rot's Exaltation Talisman for a 20% damage boost that lasts for 20 seconds, each of them triggering the boost separately, so that you can extend the duration of the boost by applying them off time with each other, which if you time it properly can keep this buff applied to you for ages, while of course also taking away at their health for double the power of just having one of them. With both of these dots applied to your enemy, you can swap to the other greases for even greater overall effects. Put on Frost Grease for frostbite to increase the damage that you deal even further, Sleep Grease which works wonders on anything that is sleepable for very obvious reasons, and arguably most importantly, the Blood Grease, as these weapons set to Arcane scaling with a high Arcane attribute and Blood Grease on top of it creates an extremely strong combination. Obviously not quite as strong as a build that focuses purely on bleed, but there are dozens of those already out there, and they are extremely effective in this game, completely ruining the vast majority of enemies and bosses around the place. No, this is not a build that can do that, but instead, it can use bleed extremely well still, but it prides itself on the sheer variety of options that you have. The multitude of ways that you can approach a different fight means that as long as you have a concept of what your opponent is weak to, you will kill it, because nothing can be immune to everything, and this build has, well,
Everything!
So, how does it all properly come together then? Where do you get each piece? And then finally, what are the required stats to make it actually fully function? Well, first up, obviously, is the Ripple Crescent Halberd, and if you want this weapon, you'll have to farm a specific enemy for the drop, which of course is the Albinauric enemies who actually wield it themselves. A nice group of 3 of them can be found just to the east of the fallen ruins of the Lake Site of Grace in the Liurnia region. You need a seal of any kind that doesn't go arf, the other ones, the ones that can cast incantations, which one doesn't really matter as we only apply Flame Grant Me Strength, which is not affected by scaling. The incantation is found behind Fort Gale in western Caelid. Technically, you could use the White Mask Helmet or the Mushroom Crown Helmet to increase your damage even further by offering more buffs when you bleed or poison or rot something, but personally, for the sake of staying on theme, as I always like to do personally, I have the Albinauric Mask and Chest Piece. Not because it makes the build better in any way, I just love embodying these little froggy guys when using their weapons. The talismans are the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation Talisman, which is found in the Seethwater cave near the bottom of Mount Gelmir in the Altus Plateau, and you get this by defeating the boss at the end. The Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman, which is found in the Lane-Del Catacombs found in the sewers under the main city, and it is dropped by the boss at the end of this. This talisman increases your damage by 20% for 20 seconds when a bleed occurs, which you can really just force to happen by simply using blood grease, or even drawstring blood grease for the express purpose of causing one bleed to trigger this buff, then move on to the next grease. This build really is just about juggling your greases to make yourself as effective as physically possible in any given situation. The last two slots are a bit more open as this build doesn't use anything crazy unique, but one of them should be either the Erdtree's Favor +2 talisman when you're doing PvE content, as this is a high value talisman, raising your HP, stamina, and equip load all in one package. Alternatively, when in PvP, you should use the Dragon Crest Great Shield talisman, as this one reduces your physical damage intake a decent amount, and it's easily enough to make the difference in PvP and make people take even one more hit to kill you than they otherwise would. For the other slot, it somewhat depends on the fight itself and what you are more comfortable using. If you're purely trying to apply greases, which I am in all of this footage, then you want to attack with both weapons simultaneously as much as you physically can, and one of the best ways to do that while dual-wielding halberds is your jump attack. As a result, using the Claw Talisman is simply a nice big 15% boost every time that you do that. Alternatively, for a more grounded style that uses a small amount of hyper armor, use the Shard of Alexander talisman and instead focus the spinning/weapon skill that comes on the weapon. I don't really use it in the fittage as it only really uses one weapon, thus applying less statuses, but the attack itself is reasonably good. It's high damage and has a little bit of hyper armor, especially once you get your bloodlust applications going, poison application buffs up and running, the damage that it does is pretty good. Past this, all you need in your pocket are loads and loads of weapon greases, with my recommendations being to use the regular ones to begin a fight as they last for 60 seconds, and then drawstring ones when reapplying mid-fight. I won't hide it, this build absolutely chews through your resources. It is not something you can just walk up and do every single fight with on a whim unless you have spent a while gathering materials to actually fuel it, as a build focused around 100% weapon grease uptime is, well, quite greasy. Once that is taken care of, however, the build is very simple. If something is weak to sleep, always start with sleep to let you get the fight started on your own terms with some extra damage. Then apply both poison and rot. One on each weapon works quite well, and generally I recommend putting the rot on your left weapon and poison on your right, as the poison tends to apply first. This allows you to replace the grease on your right hand without losing the one that's on your left hand. As a result, this weapon is very good at actually adjusting mid-fight to different situations. As I said before, it's not going to one-shot things, but it is going to be able to kill literally any enemy in the game, no exceptions, because it is capable of doing anything. After you have those statuses applied, swap to a more general damage grease, which mostly will be the blood grease as we are arcane statted, and that boosts your bleed buildup. But if your enemy is either immune to bleed or particularly weak to a certain magical element, then use the grease to match that element and do the most damage. It's like Connect the Dots, but with jars of grease, and the result is less art and more murder. The stats that you want to get this one to work are quite simple: 60 vigor, more or less as usual, 12 strength, 12 dexterity, both to wield the weapon, enough endurance to carry both of the halberds and also the armor of your choice, 15 faith to be able to use our incantation, and then 80 arcane as soon as you can, as this is our main damage stat. And with that, there you have it. A build that covers you in grease and then asks you to give your greasiness to others, all while embodying these silly little frogmen. And thus I dubbed this one the Greasy Albinaric build. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit weird, but what is weird if not also fun? Do you like this build? Is it something that you would see yourself trying, or are you happy to simply live your greasy life vicariously through me? Like if you like the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.